which is a fantastic panel, and on a topic that I think yesterday all of us kind of hinted. We talk about European integration, we talk about European values, but do our elites really believe in them, or is it, are we the bubble, to quote the Marco? Like, is it just this, or is there more to it? So let me invite Simonida Kaczarska, who will moderate this discussion, Ilir Deda, Katarina Tadic, Nikola Dimitrov, and Visari Meri. Thank you all. Let's give them a hand of applause in the morning.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for the kind introduction, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. I was with the first Kosovo Peace and Development Summit back 2 years ago, and it remained with me as one of the very dear events in which dear colleagues from Kosovo and Serbia gather, and I'm really hoping that you will continue with this endeavor. Only without giving so much wine on the first night and then expecting me to lead the session on the second day. I'm fine, but I heard that some people might be suffering. Thank you, Lira. I might need it closer, but I'm anyway loud. So, congratulations on this third event. I am going to moderate the session, which Dani announced, a bit of a psychotherapy session as well. Do the political elites want it? Let's try not to go into psychoanalysis of the elites, but to keep it a bit more real and hopefully more optimistic than what we heard yesterday. I have an exquisite panel of dear friends and colleagues. We have with us Ilir Deda, Europe's Future Fellows at the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna, Katarina Tadic from the European Fund from the Balkans, Nikola Dimitrov, our former foreign minister, and probably many other things, but also now leading a civil organization called Solutia, and a member of BIAPAC. And with us we have Visari Meri, the director of the Institute for Social Policy, Musina Kokalari. We are starting about 13 minutes late, with me shutting up hopefully very soon. I'm going to give them 5 to 7 minutes. They're great speakers, so let's try to keep it to 5, and then we'll open up for questions. Thanks for all of you for being with us. We have probably more people than we expected in the audience for an early morning session. Ilir, shall we start with you in the order that we have? Do you see the political elites committed? Are the public still committed, and possibly how do we get out of this? And also, please do reflect on the political elites, both in the region and in the Union, please.
Thank you. Well, I think this is a very tough panel, because we have to make it interesting enough to wake everybody up, right? And then second, how do we say straightforward? How do we answer these questions in a straightforward way? Dear friends, dear organizers, I'm very happy to be a part of this panel, which is one of the most important events, annual events in Kosovo, by free thinkers who are the organizers, and people who stand up for their beliefs no matter what, which I think is a European value in itself. So to all activists, media, analysts, etc., congratulations for standing up for yourselves. Second, EU, it's not what it used to be. The Western Balkans is not what it used to be. So I think if elites see that enlargement is true, real, they will want EU enlargement. If they think that it's just a big game, we will have the game of pretending. But at the same time, let's not forget that this region has been in some sort of an accession for 20 years, 21 years, and it's very difficult to maintain enthusiasm for enlargement in 2 decades. With Nikola, we were last week in Warsaw, where we had a similar subject. And I was always a fan that that if the European Union is credible about another expansion, then it should be concrete like it was with the Big Bang of 2004 by setting up a date. For example, if they say, in this geopolitical moment, EU needs to grow, right? Or how the Americans would say, we would see Europe whole, free, and at peace, then when is that going to happen? So if it's 2030, the countries would have, and the governments, would have a deadline by which they would have to race to fulfill the requirements. And if a country doesn't fulfill those requirements, then it's out. So you have to be rigorous, but also be credible. How do we believe it? And we hear now that some of the big EU countries don't want it really, and maybe it's going to be Montenegro and Moldova because they're easiest to be. I think, you know, then this geopolitical moment, as it's being called, really a moment, right? In terms of Western Balkans, we see countries playing the accession game well, some better than the others. I mean, we have this growth plan. I'm a fan of this new instrument, which deals with institutional reforms. It looks like most of the Western Balkan 6 have done their homework. They have presented their priorities for credible reforms. But then we come to the substance of living in our countries. And from my perspective, how do you measure if a government is pro-European or not? So do you go and tick the boxes and say, aha, these are the requirements that are from European Commission, and the reform agenda is being implemented? Or does it also have to do with the fundamentals of a democratic country, where there is more conversation, more dialogue, where opposition, civil society, and media can correct the decisions of the government without being labeled as enemies? So this new, what you guys in the West call polarization, right? For us, it's like there are forms of Stalinism, to be very blunt. If you criticize a government, you're not the enemy of the country. You're not even the enemy of the government, correct? And I think in Kosovo, there is I don't want to talk about other countries in the region, but here what we see is a tendency to discredit, the media and activists and civil society from the majority community. And then we have measures which are showing the minority communities, in this sense the Serbs, there are arbitrary decisions which do not allow the system to function. So the last arbitrary decision, for example, is having 6 notaries of ethnicity of Albanians being sent to the northern Kosovo, where 99% are Serbs. So you are not doing the right thing, right? So how do we correct this? And I think I'm zooming out from these details, but which are symptom that there are some things that are not working, and we all have to find a way to restore, to never allow any kind of political party, any kind of government to cross the red lines, right? If we go, but it's becoming a trend. It's a trend in the region, and it's a bad copy of failed ideologies, right? For us who are not parts of the institutions, this is how we measure as well the readiness of elites the readiness of elites to transform the countries. And our region has been going through a painful, long, prolonged post-conflict transformation. So we, on top of this European integration, in none of the Western Balkans the culture of peace has not been embedded, right? We still talk about the wars of the 90s as though they happened yesterday. In Kosovo, it ended 25 years ago. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, it ended 30 years ago. In Northern Macedonia, the conflict ended 23 years ago. There were arrangements how to build peace, but there is no culture of peace. EU enlargement should embed in itself for this region the culture of peace. You know, we cannot have these great summits and statements, joint statements in Brussels or anywhere between the leaders of the Western Balkans and European Union, and then when they come home, the way how they behave, the statements that are there, the rhetoric, the public discourse is anything than a modern, right? Modern European behavior or acting. Between Kosovo and Serbia, we have the normalization process, which for you as an institute are trying to support. And it's still a game, you know, there is mistrust, etc. But if we are stuck looking inwards in the end, there needs to come a moment where there is going to be a more open, in one of the summits of EU Western Balkans, there needs to be a discussion where the Western Balkans and EU are going to understand really each other, where we are in terms of accession, right? And at the end, EU process is not anymore as transformative as it has been in the past. In the end, it's up to all of us to try and fight to build a country that functions for all, right? Currently, most of the governments in the Western Balkans are not building states or economies that are functioning for all. And state capture, which we fought successfully in Kosovo 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years, 5 years ago, whatever, is still a model, right? It is an outcome which should not live anymore, right? Not only here, but the entire region. And because that is the biggest threat to democracy, and fundamentally, that is the biggest threat to a meaningful European transformation, I would say.
Thanks, Ilir. Visar, would you mind if we bring you here forward, because just so that we have a bit of a societal dimension, and also if you have anything to agree or disagree on Kosovo, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for organizing this summit, which I think this is my third time participating. It's a very important event. And I'm glad to be here with friends and colleagues and like-minded people. And I think that this is one of the things that we maybe need to look in the future, because we are all sort of like agreeing on things, and I think that sometimes disagreeing produces a better position and understanding of politics. So I'll try to be a bit more, how should I say, the devil's advocate in all this. And not just because I want to act, but because I really think that more often than not, we have moved, or we're moving into this comfortable position whereby we always find the fault somewhere else rather than in ourselves. And I think that that's always a problem. And this is true for political leaders and elites, and this is true for our societies as well. And to an extent for civil society as well. I want to be critical of myself too. Because I think that when we talk about political processes, there is a certain understanding that political processes have an objective lifeline, and they're not affected by subjective political will. And I think they are. Of course they are. So we have to bear in mind that always politics is a choice. So you choose between different programs, you choose between different people, and you choose different paths of politics. You want to move in direction A or in direction B, it depends on us. Of course, individually, but collectively, nonetheless. So here in Kosovo, we have this sort of like experience whereby when I was active in politics, like for example, the day after elections, people would come to me and say, oh, this government, they're going to kill us. But who voted for this government? It was you. So you're complaining about your decision and saying that, well, you see what they're doing. So perpetually we have built this understanding of our political reality and our social reality as something that has been imposed upon us, rather than something that we have built, maybe unintentionally and maybe not being aware of it, but still we have built. So I think that in this respect, I find the relationship that we're building in our discourse with the European Union to have the same sort of quality. So we say that if European Union is not interested in enlargement, then we are going to backslide in democracy, we are going to ruin our economies, we are going to ruin our social structures. So either you take us, or we are going to kill ourselves. Okay, go ahead, be my guest. So I think that we have to look on this from a different perspective. Do we really want, and do we really believe that what we understand as European values, as Ilir was talking about, are they the best values for our societies? I think that this is a starting point that we should ask ourselves. So do we really understand first what it means to be European, and then do we want to be that European? Once we answer these questions, then I think we can move on into a more complex debate and discussions. Of course, I understand that the process of accession and everything around it is quite complex. It's not easy to be transmitted to the people. But then this original or fundamental will has to be there. We were talking to Nicola and Ilir before the panel over coffee, whether we want European Union or not. And I think that, yes, if you ask people in the region, especially in Kosovo, Albania, vast majority of people say that, yes, we want to be a part of European Union. But then how we understand European Union, I think that that is a crucial question. So we want to be a part of European Union, hoping that we are going to remain exactly the same culturally as well. That's not possible. So once you talk in these terms, you see that people's readiness for European Union might become shaky. If you have to, live differently, act differently. So in this sense, I think that, if you look at what happened in the region, and I'm fully agree that the region is not the same as European Union is not the same compared to like 10 years or 15 years ago. I think that we have a very problematic and very dangerous as well backslide or regress into nationalist rhetoric in all of the countries in the region. Somewhere more than the others, but in all the countries in the region. I would exclude Albania. And this, I think that Albania is different in the way that they think and everything around the identity and everything else. But in our countries, I think that that is becoming a huge problem. For example, we have a government currently in Kosovo that is all for European Union. We want to be a part of the European Union. We want to access the single market of European Union. And then you talk about regional cooperation. And they say, no, regional cooperation, Serbia's economy is much bigger, they're going to kill us. So basically, what they're saying, not explicitly, is that, yes, we are ready to compete with the economy of Germany, but we're not ready to compete with the economy of Serbia, which is absurd. So in this sense, I think that there are a lot of very problematic signals being sent to the people, again, not necessarily intentionally, that surround this myth that we are building about what European Union is and what our prospects for European Union are. So, when we talk about whether elites want the European Union or not, of course, political elites, unfortunately, have their personal interests as well in all of the countries, and I think that, to an extent, that's understandable. Being an ex-politician myself, I understand that there is an interest that, you want to get re-elected. but then how did we come to a position whereby acting against the values of European Union gets you elected? You know, this is a question that we need to ask. Because let's face it, political elites, again, did not come from the moon. Political elites are built within our country. They stem from our culture. So to cut the long story short, and it was long already, I think that we need to understand, or at least I believe, that not necessarily the improvement of economic situations, and to an extent social situation, not necessarily that produces a different cultural viewpoint on politics, society, and the future. And that, I think, can be visible in our region. Of course, if you ask everybody in the region, they say that now living conditions are much better than they used to be like 25 or 30 years ago. Of course, 25, 30 years ago we were in war. But that did not automatically change the way that people think about, you know, citizens of the same country of different ethnicity, about different religions, and let alone about different or other regional countries. So in this sense, I think that the intervention for us to become European, and that is the responsibility first and foremost, I would believe, of public authorities, but also and especially of civil society, have to touch upon the cultural traits as well, in order for us to become Europeans, in order for us to actually build European Union-like countries in our countries, and then bring ourselves closer to European Union.
Thanks a lot. Katarina, can we bring you in here also? Serbia has been trying to take on agency, actually. I mean, Visar mentioned that in some way to act towards the EU, but also to maintain whatever it thinks that its identity is, and what was discussed before. So can we bring a bit of that perspective?
Thank you, Simonita. I'm happy to be here. And in order to answer your question, I will start with one quote. And this quote is often repeated by the gray men of the Balkans. They love to say how in the region we made a transition from repressive to depressing regimes. And in case of Serbia, this cannot be further from the truth. And to explain that, I would like to say what has been happening in Serbia in the last few months related to the environmental protest that started in June. In June, after the elections, the highly politicized Constitutional Court in Serbia, they basically overturned the previous government decision, and they gave a green light for Rio Tinto activities, that is for a lithium mine in Jadar Valley. This decision provoked, I would say, unprecedented mobilization of citizens across Serbia. So practically every small town or majority of small towns or municipalities, they held protests against a lithium mine. These protests culminated with a big protest that was held in Belgrade on the 10th of August. However, what has been a response from the government, it's basically like a Lukashenko-style form of repression. So in the past few months, between 40 and 60 activists have been arrested or detained. So it means that their homes were searched, their laptops were, their phones were confiscated, and they were charged with something, with a criminal offense that is calling for violence against the constitutional order, which is a very serious criminal offense. And then they offered a plea bargaining deal, and then they usually admit another criminal offense, which is provoking violence at sport and other public events. But in any case, they didn't commit any crime. So basically what they did, they either participated in a protest, they call others to participate in a protest. Sometimes it's for a Facebook post or for being an administrator of some Facebook page. So what we basically see, it is an increasingly repressive, autocratic regime, which is depressing to an extent that Russia or Belarus are depressing, and they are, but this practically means that the freedom of expression, of association, of assembly in Serbia has been suspended. And I would even say that that if you look at the societal level, we can even be optimistic in a sense that after 12 years of this regime, people are still willing to stand up and to fight for what they see that is in their interest or that is in public interest. So, yeah, to go back to your question and to question of this panel, I don't think that political leadership in Serbia, that they want EU integration. I don't think that this is what a democratic country does. I don't think that this is a future member of the EU does. So no, in Serbia we are faced with the government, with the regime that is intrinsically anti-EU, but just pretending that they want an EU membership for certain economic benefits, and that's it. Yeah, I'm sorry, you wanted a more optimistic panel, but...
Thanks, Katerina. Nicola, you have been trying to build up agency from the ground up, actually, after probably not doing it very much, a very good job from the top down. Joking here. But do you see any light at the tunnel? Because we heard previously there's lack of, Visar mentioned that political elites have their own calculations, sometimes hinting that this might be anti-EU. Katerina brought us to where we are, although there was a good point in agency from the ground below. So I think that this is where probably most of us should be focusing. Your 7 minutes.
So, first of all, I'm very happy to be here. It's my second participation. I was here for the first one, Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit. I enjoy coming, so please continue to invite me and do this. I think we need more of this in the region. We don't have enough gatherings, and the more we talk about often our common problems, I think the better. We need more region in our region, more regional thinking, more solidarity, more togetherness. So I'm going to try to fight down the bitterness that I instinctively have, because I'm getting old, and I'm not sure that we are getting closer to the goal of my generation. And I often say my daughter was 3-4 years when we became a candidate country. She graduated from university looking for jobs around. She just turned 25. And I cannot honestly say that our country is closer to the generational goal than when she was born. And this is saddening and it's frustrating and all that. But I think the task of my generation is not to be depressed. Although, no, the quote. This is Ramsey, I think, yes. From repressive to our friend from Tirana. So I'm going to briefly touch upon the two sides of the coin, what we can do, how we are, and what we need to change, but also what the EU is offering, and what we need on the EU side to be changed to make this work. In most of our countries, and I think we should start calling it Southeastern Europe, I'm becoming annoyed with these Western Balkans. It was coined by the Brits in the foreign office. Meanwhile, they're out of the Union. So I think, because it's important, even subconsciously, when you say Western Balkans, you can mentally put it outside of Europe. We are very much part of the continent. We are surrounded by member states. I think we should, at least on our side, and work with our friends in Brussels and other capitals, we should start using Southeastern Europe. Politics in our region is about becoming powerful, is a lot about becoming rich, and there is a genuine contradiction in what politicians want and the acquis and the European reforms that we need to do at home. So I'm going to share a small anecdote of a high-level member of a government in Skopje who met experts who are pushing for this law on high-level management. Zakon za visoka rakovodna služba was the proper English translation. So essentially introducing merit and procedure and competencies into when you appoint directors of public agencies, companies, state secretaries, etc. And the member of the government told them, what? Why do you think I am in politics? So if politics is about giving jobs to voters because they voted, giving tenders to friends, then those politicians will find the reforms that we need to do quite difficult. And I like what Donika Emini said in Tirana at the last Berlin Process Civil Society gathering. These reforms are actually not difficult. Why do we say these are difficult reforms? People want them, citizens want them. They're difficult for these types of politicians who would like to have impunity rather than accountability, who would like to have public prosecutors and judges in their pockets, who would like to control the media so that something that is not favorable is not published, so that there is darkness instead of light. So these politicians, of course, they can pay lip service. I think it's probably hard to find a single leader in our region, in Southeastern Europe, who, when it comes to public statements, is not in favor of joining the European Union, of European integration. But I think our test should be what they do on these key issues: fighting corruption or being corrupt, impunity versus accountability, meritocracy versus putting party soldiers in important places and crippling, making institutions weak. So I think this should be our test. Regardless of all the disappointments that we've had, and I think those are quite striking and obvious. Thessaloniki promise, where are we? We have one success in our region, which is Croatia 2013, not much to show after that. I think we have a responsibility for the next generations to recognize the moment, to recognize that perhaps, and I am, in all honesty, not fully convinced yet, but the war in Ukraine seems to slowly open another window. We are yet to be fully certain, of course, but we don't have the luxury of not being there if this is really happening. So we need to be in sync with the process that is very clumsily developing in Brussels and in all European capitals. This means that we need to make our case stronger on key reforms, on working together. We need to make it more difficult for them to simply dismiss us as the problematic countries in our midst. The stronger we make our case, the more difficult it's going to be, and we need to be part of this debate. We also need to try to speak with one voice in asking them to reduce the veto points. Whether we do it by qualified majority voting in the interim stages or enlargement, or in other ways, it is obvious that arbitrary use of veto powers on issues often not very European and not related to the Copenhagen criteria is extremely damaging to the process, and my country, North Macedonia, is a very drastic case in point. Then what Ilir said, It's unpopular to talk about dates, but we probably need an atmosphere that is a reverse Juncker. We all remember when he said, upon assuming his role in the Commission, there won't be new members, there won't be enlargement. Now, if we are working in that direction, we need a different signal. For von der Leyen to be able to say, by the end of the term of this Commission, or the latest maybe, the end of the next multi-annual financial cycle, we're gonna be getting new members. It should be on record, the Council should follow, so candidate countries, make sure you're ready, because we're gonna get you in only if you're ready. Then the moment of truth, there will have to be funds allocated for new members in the next multi-annual financial cycle. This, the planning, the negotiations are starting. If there are no funds, then this is all a bluff. So the region should, even together with Ukraine and Moldova, go to member states and Brussels and say, this is what we need, this is what we want. We need to be part of this debate. We need to be, to help, in a way, Europe become really geopolitical. So we need some luck. I think we need stars to be aligned. It's a good move that we won't have Oliver Varhey as a commissioner, that it looks like it's going to be Slovenia. The hearings are still ahead of us, we'll see. But we need a strong leader there, a heavyweight, coming from a country that is not a problematic member state. A country with authority to talk about values. And a personality that will be guardian of the treaties and that will really be a best friend of the candidate countries. This was not the case with the previous commissioner. Now, can we, if there is no trigger, signal, serious push coming from the EU towards Southeastern Europe, can we as citizens and civil society do this on our own? I don't know. I think we have to try. And this is why this bottom-up, we have a platform for civic engagement called Imagine, because you have to be able to imagine first and then act. And we are now focused on the health sector. We are trying to change legislation so that managers of the hospitals in North Macedonia do not have discretionary powers to employ whoever they want, to have a proper level playing field for young doctors to get a job in the country. Because the best ones we are losing to Germany and other member states. So at least to have a smaller political cake when it comes to the health sector, education as well, and try to have a line between where political parties end and the state starts. Make it a bit smaller. Do we have political allies? We will see. Health Minister Taravari, on a panel we organized, publicly said he will support this. Let's hope there is a success. And I think the more we can show to the people that being loud and active and organized and mobilized can make a difference, the more successful we're going to be in facing this very overwhelming apathy in our society, because the Macedonian society went to high hopes that were betrayed, both by political elites at home and the European Union to some extent. So now people say we cannot make it. People are giving up. There is a loss of agency. So, and apathy is never a positive thing, right? Nothing good can come out of it, from being silent, from being in your own bubble. I don't know how to enter an optimistic note. I used to say in the final days of the negotiations for the Prespa agreement, do you think a breakthrough is possible? I would say, look, even in the Balkans, miracles are possible. So, so I think this is possible. This is not impossible. not easy. And I, with Visar, your point that these political elites are not from another planet. We make them, they're parts of our societies, of our culture, etc. So pushing them, helping them when, praising them when they do something good. And I think we have to demand honesty for our friends in the EU. We really deserve honesty. Nowadays, in many member states, enlargement is about Ukraine. And I think we can help. I'm afraid to say that at some point, Ukraine will need the experience of our countries as candidate countries to manage expectations. Because the strength of their case now, they have a very strong case, will probably get weaker later when there is peace and when the real problems kick in. So we need their enthusiasm, they need our experience.
Thank you, Nicola. Ilir wanted to chip in, and then I'm opening for questions.
Yes, thank you. Exactly. So I don't think we need to be optimists in this current. It's good enough that we are realists. In terms of knowing if this is going to happen, is definitely the next budget. If there are no EU funds for enlargement for us, right? Then we know that this is just a missed opportunity for European Union and missed opportunity for us. And we don't know the consequences of such a missed opportunity because the Western Balkans go crazy when things go in a different direction. Second, Ukraine is already a part of the single market. We who have been in this process for 20 years are now discussing about steps to sectorally integrate into EU single market, while Ukraine and Moldova already are. So I think there needs, when I say the serious discussion with EU leadership is like, let's all be at the same level. And then third, when it comes to people-to-people discussion. How do I go to northern Kosovo and tell Kosovo Serbs, we are building a just European society? When they feel pressured, abandoned, lost, hopeless. How? Who goes there and says, we are building inclusive institutions, rule of law, where mechanisms that are in place you can use to fight arbitrary decisions, and they can't. So apart from the topics that we have, there is the reality of life. Or for that matter, for any non-majority group in the region, right? If we cannot prove or show, then we can build jointly just societies with full respect of different interests of non-majority groups. Why do we need EU integration? Or will the EU integration do that? I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we open up for questions and comments? Yes, we have one over here. We have one here.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Miloš Paković, European Policy Center, Belgrade. We talked a lot about the political elites and authoritarianism and lack of understanding for reforms, etc., etc. And I think that the EU has part of responsibility for it because of its stabilitocracy policy towards the Western Balkans. The EU has a lot of, oftentimes turned a blind eye on these practices, and it looks like that the EU is still turning a blind eye. Katarina mentioned the Rio Tinto and lithium exploration. We've seen that the European Union has openly supported the Rio Tinto project. And my question is, do we need a change of stance in the Brussels as well when it comes to these undemocratic practices that were tolerated by now, and these transactional relations that existed and still exist between the EU and the Western Balkan countries? This question is for whoever wants to answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Milos. We have one more here, and then Serjan. Yes, please.
Yeah, I want to offer maybe a different indicator than the next budget for the question of whether the European Union is serious about accepting new countries, and it's basically to look back historically at what was happening, 4, 5, 6 years before the last enlargement with Croatia. And if you look at the position, the way the European Union interacted with Croatia in 2008-9, put extraordinary pressure on the government to clean up the deep-seated corruption that existed, and which exists in all of the countries of Southeastern Europe. As a result of which the Prime Minister resigned, fled to Hungary, was arrested, and is still in jail to this moment. Okay. Now, do we see that kind of pressure being put on on countries that behave autocratically? You could say maybe in North Macedonia some years ago, after the crisis with the so-called bombs, there was a little moment. Maybe a little bit in Montenegro also a few years ago, but it's not much. And I wonder how and this to me says that it's simply an accurate judgment on the part of Brussels and member states that we're not there yet. We're not at the moment of being, 4, 5, 6 years out when we would need to put that kind of pressure to make sure that the countries that come in will meet the Copenhagen criteria. We're further out. That's what it seems like to me, and I wonder what you make of that indicator.
Thank you. We had Serjan, and then the Croatian ambassador.
Is it now? Yeah. Sergej Mestorovic, European Policy Center and BIPAG member. I mean, maybe unintentionally, but the title of the panel basically is much wider than what we are focused in this region. Because you shed a light on a much wider battlefield, which is Europe. The fact is that currently in Europe we have a clash of two ideas of Europe. One is a Europe that needs to go forward, that needs to prepare for the challenges of the 21st century, that needs to designate more and more powers to Commission, to community approach. But then again, we are also facing the other ideas of Europe, where the national states are trying to preserve their sovereignty through populism, through far-right ideas, and we shouldn't be blind and turn a blind eye on that phenomenon too. Does this European situation, rather situation in Europe, is affecting what's going on in the region as well? And while I'm on the region, Nicola, I will beg to disagree with regards to the name. It's not about the name, it's not about symbolism, it's about the substance. My idea is to prove that the Western Balkans are actually better Balkans, that we can do something better. That we need to be proud of our Balkan heritage and show that we are capable of producing something good. But as I said, the European framework is shaping the internal political situation in the region as well. We are witnessing the creation of very coalition of the populist and right-leaning parties from Europe with the regimes in the region, starting maybe from the Netherlands, Italy, even Sweden, Hungary, very soon, most probably Austria, Serbia, obviously, maybe even Macedonia. I mean, it's a fresh situation. It's still a fresh government. We haven't seen. We need to give them benefit of doubts of 90 days in the office, but I don't have high hopes, I must say. So these people are just going to sit and wait. So do they want it? I tend to agree with what Katarina said. I don't think, and what Ilir said, that there is no modernity in the politics that these people are presenting. Quite a contrary, they are much more based in a traditional hardline politics. And how to change it? I think the bottom up is the only way. And, you know, you can fool some people for some time, but in Serbia with these protests, it's quite obvious that you cannot fool all the people all the time. So sooner or later, there will be a bottom-up impetus that will have to lead to political change. And then our generation will maybe get a second chance to finish what we started in the early 2000.
Thanks, Sergeant. Ambassador Barisic.
Is it okay? Thanks a lot. In Croatia's case, putting our prime minister into the jail because of the corruption proved that we had rule of law, and that was the case for us, telling all the people that the law applies on everybody, no matter the function. But the thing is, after that, there was a period of time when we were listening to the discussions like, you are so corrupted, even your prime minister went to jail. And wasn't it something that we should be applauded for? That we even put him? Okay, after his resignation and so on. But I wanted to tell you that even at that time, when we were negotiating, and we thought that it was so long, and we negotiated for 5 years and 9 months, so it's very short, basically, but at that time we thought it's too long. We were blocked by our neighboring country for 2 years, but still we didn't stop doing reforms and doing our homework. We were going to Brussels and technically discussed all the chapters. And at that time also, it was very common to hear enlargement fatigue. So it's nothing new. So it's just the cycles. But we were lucky at that time, or the stars were aligned, as Nicola would say, because the circumstances and the environment was much, much better than today. It was before global financial crisis, before Arab Spring, before migrants, before ISIL, before Brexit. So everything looked much more rosy. Since I was working in the office of the President of the Republic of Croatia since '95, so you can say I'm a masochist, and still in 30 years I'm you know, like to listen these kind of discussions. But I've been through many meetings, and especially regional bonds. During 2000 and mid-2000, we had many regional meetings every 2 or 3 months. So the leaders were discussing among themselves. They didn't need EU, Western Balkans, or Southeastern Europe summits. They discussed among themselves on the breakfast, lunches, or whatever. So it's also about the personalities. It's also about that. So we were, you know, having meetings from Karađorđevo to Ohrid, or I don't know, Dubrovnik in Croatia, normally speaking to each other, the leaders, and all of us being, you know, advisors to our leaders. And at that point of time, it was something normal. Unfortunately, after all of this, we again have to open the dialogue among us, or I can say among you, but still, we joined the EU, but we didn't move to another part of the world, so we still carry. Thanks.
Thank you. We are closing this round because I see no more hands. Thank you very much. I think all of the interventions were very meaningful. Now that you mentioned Ohrid, and this brings me to Srđan's comment, we have a special visit of the Hungarian government today in Ohrid. They will be there with Mr. Orban today and tomorrow for a special session with the Macedonian government, so that's, I think, is clear where we are headed. Thank you, Milos, for kind of also signaling what was going to be my question. My big question is actually, you mentioned stabilitocracy. I see Agon here. We've discussed a couple of times the questions of the Danish prison in Kosovo, the camp in Albania, the lithium mines. My question, the question that hangs in my head over these probably a couple of months has been, have we gone too far with both political elites in the EU and the Balkans feeling too comfortable in the region remaining a periphery? Because going back to what we've discussed, in order for the EU member states to be interested also to support that, they need to see a benefit from the long-term positive transformation of this region. And it seems that we are running into a completely different direction, that the benefit seems to be from getting the labor force, from and all of these other instruments that we've started using. So I'm wondering, how do we go beyond this status quo, because it's going to have implications for them down the road. So just to, we had a question on the signaling that is being sent, and probably the second question also led me to it. Thanks, Servojm, for the bottom up. I think I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to kind of reflect on these very insightful comments. We can possibly start from Visar and then we move our way up here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I do agree that the interventions and comments are very useful in order to bring us to the second stage of, and I do agree that, of course, both the way that the EU institutions, but as well as developments in member countries, political developments and others, have an effect in the region, and that is inevitable. And it is visible as well, for example, for particular leaders in the region, and then the relationship that they build with particular countries in the European Union, and then the support that they get thereof changes more often than not, even the stand of European Union as well. This has to do with procedures of decision-making in the European Union and the things that Nicola was talking about, but also it has to do with the level of European Union and member states being ready to live up to their values, or the values that brought European Union together and the values that actually made the enlargement of European Union possible. Because let's say, for example, I mean, if conditions being put to regional countries that go out of the usual ordinary conditions, if we start talking about history, culture, language as conditions, then this goes out of what EU used to be. And this creates a completely new situation. And then, because that's why I say that, European Union has to be discussed with our societies, not just in terms of, looking at ourselves and seeing how European we are, but also in terms of what European Union is becoming. Let's talk about that as well. Is European Union always going to be this progressive political conglomerate that we all aspire to go to? What guarantees us that? I'm not trying to be skeptic and say that, no, we don't want European Union, but I think that these dynamics of European Union has to be taken into consideration. If you ask me whether Kosovo should be a European Union member, I say yes. But then if you ask me, do you want to be Sweden or Hungary? Of course I say Sweden. And no Hungary, And this is, I think, a legitimate discussion that we need to have. To me, a very important signal of whether European Union wants a transformed societies and not just a relationship which is going to serve joint interest or mutual interest. Apart from what Marco was saying, I think that there has been a discussion whether the social components need to be a part of the evaluation process as well for countries. So the social transformation and social solidarity in terms of more fair distribution of wealth, whether that should be a component and a strong component in evaluating countries. And of course, I come from that way of thinking that I think it should, because that is an additional point that makes you a more European. And the third thing that I want to touch upon, which I think relates a bit to a attempted answer to what Miloš was talking about. Of course, that stabilocracy as a paradigm has been present in the region, not just now, to be quite honest, it was always present. And to an extent, you understand the reason why. You can't really say that, this is completely unsubstantiated. But I think that one of the problems that I see with the process is that more often than not, the negotiations between EU and the countries or the government of the countries have a tendency to become too closed in themselves. And therefore, they don't have a proper translation of what is going on to the people. So the process of EU integration is not really a conversation between governments and the people, which gives governments, and especially more authoritarian regimes, a huge space to frame and define what European Union means and how we go to European Union. And I think that that creates a lot of false expectations, misunderstandings, and then we come to a point where we say that we have been betrayed by European Union. And this is unjust what is happening to us. And we have that conversation in Kosovo for like 3 years. All you hear in public discourse in Kosovo is how unjust the West is towards Kosovo. And I think that this is a result of that, I would call, non-democratic way that the European Union deals with the process itself. Of course, there have been some campaigns into informing people of what European Union is. But then I think that this needs to be a more open debate in order, and more democratic debate, in order for coming closer to European Union should mean that we all go at the same pace to European Union. And I mean people, institutions, reforms, and everything else. Not to have, Elysium, so you have first the leaders to become Europeans, and then you have the people eventually coming back. Because we see that the potential for backslides, even within European Union, is becoming a greater possibility and a greater risk.
Thank you. Nicola?
Enjoying the discussion, the comments, the questions. The first one on opportunism and the transactional trends that are coming from our European friends. I think this, in the long run, is quite a problem. Because why do we like the West? Why do we look up to the West? It's because the belief, the perception that the West is more principled and more about fairness and more just than the rest of the world. So it's not only the economy is part of this, EU itself, what is the strongest trait? It's the single market. EU is an economic giant, even though it used to be a bigger giant. In the 60s and the 70s, it was 1/3 of the world economy. Today, it is 14% of the world economy. So, but in terms of its political weight, it's far from there. And I think if the West loses this aura of ability to lead by example, double standards, I turned a blind eye to lack of freedom of media because I need this rare earth material, lithium, and this will bite the West in the long run. And to some extent also the policies or lack of policies on the Gaza situation. Because next time the West goes and talks about International Criminal Court, etc., this will be, this will be a problem. It will not be trusted. And so I think this is why our journey is actually these days even more difficult than 10 or 20 years ago. Our natural allies are not as reliable as they used to be. And this, I think we have to take into account. I agree with this pressure on corruption. It's also an indicator. Do I see it in the region today? Not really. In a way, the process has been turned so upside down that our self-declared extremely pro-EU government that fell down, is no longer, in the name of the EU and under the European flag, which is a fast procedure in Parliament to align with the acquis, so you cannot filibuster it, amended the criminal code in a way that strengthens impunity. And this was not even, apart from the loud Dutch ambassador in Skopje, not many spoke against it, because the whole EU and the national debate was Bulgaria amendments, but as if EU is only about bilateral issues. You know, so I think there is far from a proper focus on fighting corruption. I mean, the Dutch, but we'll now see with this government how will that work even in the Netherlands. I think one relevant question related to the question, do they want it, do our political elites want European integration, is can you win on a European ticket in our region? This is a very relevant question in a situation where in most of our countries the trust that EU is serious is going down. In Macedonia we have, what, 68% in favor? It used to be higher. But half of those 68, only 34, believe that EU is serious about enlargement. So after everything that we've been through with the Prespa agreement and all that, and the friendship treaty with Bulgaria, and then France first, and now proudly the torch in Sofia, the veto torch, can you win on a European ticket in this context? Maybe you can win on an anti-corruption ticket. But the European narrative has changed to an extent that it's less about anti-corruption, it's less about democratic institutions, it's more about bilateral disputes in our domestic context. And the last point, is European integration part of the political calculus of our leaders? Maybe it will become so. Maybe if you talk to, I met recently the president of Montenegro, Milatovic, I think it is part of his calculus. But I don't see it very often. I think this has been dragging on for too long, and it's so far in the future, and it's so uncertain that it's rarely part of the calculus when you make decisions as a leader to take into account the European perspective, that this will happen, this will affect my chances, increase my chances, etc. So that's why I think both sides of the coin are important. What do we do, and how do we explain and convince our friends in Europe that they also need to make this a common success?
Katerina?
I think that the first thing that what the EU should do is that they should admit that they bet on the wrong guy in case of Serbia. So Vučić is practically the source of internal and external instability. They shouldn't buy this narrative that protests against lithium mine in Rio Tinto are anti-West protests. So we now even have some numbers that show that. So around 60% of the Serbian population, they opposed the mining. The age group that is the biggest opponent of this are those between 18 and 40. And this is basically the group that has been traditionally the most pro-EU. The only age group that supports the lithium mining are those aged 60 or more, and they have primary school. And this has been traditionally they have been the supporters of SNS, and they're anti-EU. So yeah, the EU should understand that the Serbian population doesn't see this project that it's in their own interest, and that they're opposing it because there is a huge level of distrust in the Serbian institutions and in the Serbian governments that these environmental standards that are promised, so we don't believe that they will be protected. And also in terms of general support for the EU, it is the government that likes to present it as an they present the entire EU accession process as an uphill battle in terms of public support, but basically the government is the main source and the main promoter of anti-EU narrative. So basically they are creating the situation within the country that are then using it as an excuse not to do reforms or not to deliver what has been promised in Brussels. We were talking about the citizens, and there's the need of the bottom-up approach. The EU should continue to support forces and civil society, even though they're against lithium, if they are pro-EU and if they are pro-democratic, because for us, in Serbia, like, the EU values are the only defense that we have against corruption, against nationalism, against clientelism. So, so yeah, I hope that the new commissioner will do some soul searching in the following years. But I'm younger, so I'm optimistic. And yeah, that they will change their attitudes towards political leadership in Serbia, because I think it would be a game changer for the entire region.
Thank you. While we say these things, it's not that we don't understand that after Russian invasion of Ukraine, the West doesn't care about democracy. The mode is peace, stability everywhere else in the world, and quick agreements with the governments. So you have Italy-Albania agreement on migrants, Serbia-EU agreement on lithium, Serbia-US agreement on energy, and who is a better partner, right, to maintain stability in all these parts of the world where the West cannot be involved in all these other crises? Then what does Gaza tell you? It's also a symptom, but it's a message too, right? We understand, you know, like we understand. And in terms of Montenegro, I talked to some friends in this new government of Montenegro. They are being asked who is going to be the highest level that will be arrested at the end of this year. So they show the model that now Croatia is the example to jump in for 2028. So, you know, they're not naive. They have they're almost there, but we don't know there, but they're asked. There's an anecdote that I heard in Zagreb that actually the expectation was not to indict the prime minister, but that it was so many times repeated, you have to do it at the high level, that the special prosecutors thought that the highest level is him. And then they did it. But this is an anecdote. And in the end, we need to understand that no other process is going to strengthen democracy or separation of institutions or checks and balances than ourselves. And we have to understand that in this massive instability in the world, which we don't know where it will lead, the transactionalism comes as a mode of behavior, conduct. And it's okay, that's how it has always happened, right? But if we understand this, then we will also be able to communicate what is the baseline that needs to be maintained on functioning democracy to be able to have accession, right? I mean, we cannot become Hungary and then a new Hungary joins the EU. So there needs to be a baseline. And I think that non-governmental actors have the space to identify which is this baseline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there were some optimistic moments in this closing session. Are there any comments further on? No? In that case, I will thank you. We did start late, but we're ending a bit early, so this might be a good signal for the region. You know, we might get there sooner than we hoped. Dan, I pass it on to you, and thanks from my side to the panelists.
Thank you. Really engaging conversation. Thank you all. Now I want to invite you for a coffee break. Those staying with us in the hotel, don't forget the checkout is at 12, and then we come back for another very engaging conversation after the break at 11:15. So thank you again to all the panelists. Thank you. Boy, I quoted you in the morning. Yes. Whoever is in the back, like shtirimtare, please move to the front. Vlera, Nisa, join us. Leia, Marigona, don't be shy. Okay, welcome to the second panel of the day 2, a panel that has a very, I think, the most difficult task. We talk about this being a super election year, elections everywhere. I guess for us, the most important, for our region, external elections were the ones in the EU, and we are waiting for the November elections in the US. They will have the most impact. We will have our own elections in Kosovo in February. So it is an election year, and elections are determining everything. Marco yesterday made the point that we had a constructive mentality coming into the KPDS, that you found that very, very good. So now I think this might be the most constructive panel, but let's see, there might be some spicing up. So it's a pleasure for me to present France at this panel that will be moderated by our dear colleague Sonja Stojanovic, with Marko Savkovic, Lorenzo Conti from EPLO, and Maria Simeneova from the ECFR. I tried your last name to make sure I don't forget the O, because in my mind it was Simenova, and I was like, there is an O there. So thank you, Maria, so much for coming from ECFR office, head of ECFR office in Bulgaria. So thank you so much. I pass it on to you, Sonja. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you, colleagues, for surviving and staying for the second day. You heard my name is Sonja Stojanovic-Gajic. I can say Merdita, Ljemte Dua, and that's about it in Albania, but I think it's enough for opening the space. I plan to host non-panel. In a sense, I have great panelists and they are going to speak, but I'm going to call you to participate from the beginning. So you don't have to wait for hearing the big analysis and then taking part. But I'm also tough on time and rules, so the first type of engagement, both for you and for my great panelists, is going to be actually without analysis, but just to take the pulse. But to go back to our topic, just to frame the discussion, hopefully in this event, we are going to discuss our region only by the end of the event. We are going to take a bigger picture and look more into the globe and what's going on around us, and not just in our continent, but globally, and see how this biggest year in history, when it comes to the elections, might affect our future. So somebody last night mentioned that we feel like we are living history. So this year is historical because the biggest number of people are voting. I quoted 3.2 billion people, 72 countries. And we all discuss US and EU elections, but the first thing I would want to see is, are there any other elections that matter? But before that, I hope you're all following Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit social media, so you know the bios of my panelists. You heard that Maria is a head of Sofia Office of European Council of Foreign Relations that claims to be intellectual insurgents when it comes to foreign and security policy. But I think there is no country today that is more into elections than Bulgaria, that should have the 7th elections in, 3 years. So that should make Maria even more competent, especially because this rapid turnover of governments happened after the protest in 2020, which were about state capture, the topic that we've discussed, which is common for our region. So are elections the tool to confront state capture is something I hope to hear from Maria later on. Lorenzo comes from European Peacebuilding Liaison Office, which is a platform of 54 civil society organizations from whole of Europe, including one of the organizers of Kosovo Peace and Democracy Summit, my long-term partners, Kosovo Center for Security Studies. And he's based in Brussels, but he will speak on behalf of EPLO and experience of gauging with the Brussels bubble. But I also asked my panelists, what's a funny thing that people would not know about them? So one thing which I hope he might share later on is that he likes exploring the new cities by having a run in them. So hopefully he can share his impressions from Pristina. And also as a student, he used to pick fruits during summer. So we are not born into suits and panels and high-profile discussions. There has been all kinds of life experience that shaped us and that shape also the elections we discuss. Marko has also linked to the fruits. He tried to sold them in the green market in Belgrade, but was fired, you say. But he had more success with training kids in basketball. So he will speak about foreign policy and security, but if you want to discuss something passionately with Marko, basketball is his entry. Here, more people. Okay, so let's move on. As I said, before we start discussion, I want to take the pulse in the room and on the stage. So I'll ask 3 questions. I don't want you to give me speeches, just short answers. So, just straightforward answer to the question. We will demonstrate first with the panelists, and then I'll ask the audience to complement and add on if they forgot or if you have a different view. Okay? Do we have Mike ready to move around? Perfect. So, my first question to Maria is, beyond US and EU elections, which elections are on your mind as important for the future of this region or the globe? So just short answer.
3. Okay. German, French, Austrian, Bulgaria. Please allow me to do that. Thank you.
Yes, well, my expertise is kind of EU foreign policy, so there are some not super known elections that are happening in 2024.
Just list them.
Yeah.
I'll ask you to explain.
Georgia, Chad, and Iraq.
Okay, Georgia, we might have followed, but the other 2 would be really interesting also to hear. Marco, anything new?
Nothing new, Germany and France for me.
Okay. Anyone in the audience has some other elections that we have not mentioned that you think will matter? Any? Any of the listed that you would support? Yes, Stefan.
Chinese elections.
Well, that was 2 years ago, so they have some time. Just to put it on the table, the US elections should not be neglected in the conversation down the road.
We will discuss US and EU. I was asking beyond the usual suspects. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Did you mention Bosnia? Next, I think it's in 2 weeks.
Yeah, local elections in Bosnia in 2 weeks. So for our region, besides Kosovo, we should not forget Bosnia, and we heard about Bulgaria. Okay, second round. This is a bit more complex task, but the same exercise. No explanations, just 3 words. So, which are the 3 words that come to your mind when you think of priorities of new commission? Marco?
Well, I would say cost of living or standard of living. I would say migration. I would say defense.
Okay. So 2 security, 1 economic. Lorenzo, would you add or complement?
Defense, for sure. Trade and the economy. And enlargement, why not?
Okay, we are on the list.
So some of my answers are not that concrete in terms of policies, but more like words that come up to my mind when I look at the structure of the...
No explanations, just
okay.
throw them out.
So 3 words: competitiveness, recognition, deals.
Can you repeat them again?
Competitiveness,
Okay.
recognition, and deals.
Deals, okay. Yeah, ECFR claims to be the place for meeting between decision makers, activists, and influencers. So they must know the way about the deals. Okay, any other words that you think my panelists forgot and that would resonate with new commission? Please. Trade relations we heard. With China, okay. Energy, okay.
And innovation, not only competitiveness, but innovation and competitiveness.
Okay, we hear who has read Draghi's report in this room. Okay.
AI, right?
AI. Okay, last chance. I think I saw an American colleague raising his hand. For EU elections, no?
Illegal migration.
Okay, what Marco said. Okay, so we had migration twice, defense twice, a lot of trade relations. Dani's, oh yeah, it's good enough we got enlargement. But let's see. But you bring me back, okay, you bring me back to my last question in this exercise. No, it's the one before the last. And this is what are going to be forgotten or forbidden words for the new EU Commission? Lorenzo, shoot.
I'm gonna be provocative. Values, reputation, and peace.
Okay. I'm gonna follow up on this because his office is dealing with peace building. But after we collect the first associations, Maria.
So forbidden or forgotten words for the foreign policy or commission?
For the Commission. It could be in foreign policy.
Forgotten is definitely soft power.
Soft power, okay. So again, norms and values.
And unanimity / QMV. I don't know which one. But I think both fit.
Okay.
I would say QMV. Yeah.
Marco?
Unfortunately, I agree with Lorenzo on peace. I was just thinking about that. Well, for us, conditionality. And something we grew up with was the notion transformative power of EU integration.
So 3 times we got the normative, transformative power of EU, peace twice, and then about its reputation, conditionality. It's your turn. Any words that you think will be, thrown away?
I'll put Taiwan on the table.
Surprise, surprise. Stefan breathes and dreams about China. Any other word that you think is going to be sidelined? Okay, legally binding. Once, twice. Okay, the last in this row, we are going back to the US elections. So, the 3 words that you think will top the agenda after the US elections, and because we don't know the outcome, you can have 6 if you think that there will be a difference between Harris and Trump's administration.
So in the case of Trump, I have business, short-term, negligence. In the case of Harris, I have transatlantic Europe and values.
Can you repeat for Harris? I haven't.
Transatlantic, Europe, values.
Okay.
Quite abstract.
Not that it's not clear who do we prefer, okay? Lorenzo?
I will only use 3 words, and I think will apply both to Trump and Harris, but to a different degree. And these words are disenchantment, disconnect, and uncertainty.
Okay.
So for Trump, unpredictability, volatility, arrogance, conflict. And for Harris, continuity, unity, freedom, conflict.
Okay, to summarize, my panelists expect uncertainty to remain. There seems to be a clear preference for, or more optimism about the one candidate than the other, at least with the two of the panelists. But also Lorenzo has highlighted the problem with politics as they are played out in US with this distrust, disenchantment. Anybody from the audience wants to offer their 2 cents on 3 words for after the US elections? So 3 priorities of US in one or the other scenario. Just Mike, please.
Eastern Europe, as Nicholas.
Yeah, that's the funny one. I don't know if you follow the news, but Trump's oldest was in Belgrade the other day. I don't know why he was campaigning in Belgrade, but apparently it's an agenda. Any other options? No? Okay. I hope this exercise woke us up, everyone. Also, what I was hoping to bring forward is not just our thinking, but a bit of emotions and, hopes, fears. And I'm gonna now ask my panelists to go deeper behind this. So let's start with the US. So what are you hoping for? Are you afraid of from the US elections? And you can speak in regards to what might happen in US, in the globe, or the consequences for Europe. I know Marko volunteered to address this issue, so just be brief so that we can have as much exchange. Yes.
Well, I feel it's a daunting task to be brief on the issue of US elections. However, I was looking this morning at this big compilation of data from Pew Research Center on how the 2 candidates are faring so far and where the differences are, and also what the priorities are for citizens. And economy and healthcare, of course, lead the way, and only then foreign policy. Where differences are greatest, they're on violent crime, immigration, gun policy, abortion. So on all these highly contentious issues. And the 2 poles have only drifted apart even more. When you look at data for the past 3 or 4 years, of course, since the last presidential elections. I mean, in particular, over the past 3 years, immigration for Trump supporters has doubled almost as a priority. And same has happened with abortion for Harris supporters, which is perfectly understandable, of course, for anyone who's been following developments in the US recently.
But what will that mean for after the elections?
This is where I'm getting at. When asked who can bring the country closer, citizens in a 5 to 7% majority answer Harris. But when asked who would manage the economy better, citizens also respond in a 5 to 7% majority, Trump, which is also very interesting. What would this mean? I think, and someone said, I think it was Milica, on the issue of trade and tariffs. It's not only with China, there are concerns on the issue of trade and tariffs with the EU as well, not to go into great details, which would really, jeopardize the global economy as we know it today. But this is coming from growing demand of citizens concerned with losing pace and seeing quality of life going down. Yes.
Thank you, Marko, for giving this introduction. I was following, I follow both campaigns on social media, and Haris has published, as you said, you know, the ad on her economy countering the Trumps, and they seem to compete who is going to protect more made in US. So this issue of tariffs is going to affect us one way or the other. Before I ask two other panelists to reflect on US elections, again, quick question for everyone in the room. Raise a hand if you think the transition of power will go peacefully in US this time. Okay, so about half in the room. So there is some optimism, there is big scare. You know, the most powerful country in the world no longer has predictability of the rules of the game. So, yeah, I just wanted to bring to the surface my biggest fear. It's not the outcome and how we'll deal with the implications, but what if the elections as a process are not accepted in such a powerful country and model. So, Maria, what are you afraid of or hoping for after US elections?
Well, I will concentrate on the profiles of the two candidates, Trump and Harris. And I will start with the assumptions I made just now. And I will try to give a different angle than what Marco said. So we have Trump, whom we know. And we've lived through it, and somehow, you know...
Anybody knows Trump?
We know his presidency, but maybe some people know him in the room. I cannot tell. What I'm trying to say is that based on his first mandate, we can draw some conclusions on his kind of reflexes. And this will be very important, and this is why I say that when I hear Trump and I think of foreign policy and transatlantic relations, I think of short-term policies, short-term decisions, and I think of business deals. So this is what we can tell based on his first mandate, that he's going to chase you know, some quick decisions and will neglect maybe deeper problems, especially this is valid for our region, and this is not good news for our region, especially the times we're living in. Whereas Harris, we don't have a very clear picture yet. I mean, even in the debate, and anything we know for now is quite vague to an extent. But what we can expect is continuity, and at least we can hold on the transatlantic relationship. And for Europe, it will be very important to have someone in the White House who will be engaged with the European security, with continuing engagement of the US on the continent, and especially on Ukraine. And this will be important given the upcoming tough negotiations within the EU on the next multi-annual financial framework. So Harris is the candidate that, from a financial point of view including, will be better news for Europe.
If I may add a short comment, 10 years ago, during Obama's administration, I was on a State Department's program on national security. And in 6 weeks of program, we were hearing about Iraq, China, Africa. There was one session on Europe, and it was on Russia. And they barely got the person who could speak about it, who had some experience. But the good news, as you said, apparently Harris's top foreign policy advisor has been socialized, studied, did his PhD on Europe, lived in Europe, and so on. Although he also acknowledges that Europe is not going to be a priority to either. But Lorenzo, where do you expect changes or continuity when it comes to foreign policy and security especially?
Yes, actually, I mean, of course I agree with this reading of Harris being a better president than Trump for Europe. The reason why I chose to use the same three words for both candidates is because maybe I took the question as more of a long-term perspective. And I think the EU, but in general European countries, they should now work on the assumption that they will be much less influential at the global level, and that the US will gradually pivot away from Europe and look at other regions, so the Pacific, Taiwan, etc. And that's a trend that's already in place, as you mentioned, just with this anecdote. And I think in particular this feeling of disenchantment will be interesting because it's that feeling of disappointment in like someone you love or someone you admire that all of a sudden takes another leadership direction. And same for like disconnect. I think the U.S. focusing especially on security on other regions will have a big impact on the EU. So.
Your turn. Anybody wants to add something we haven't so far thought of as a consequence of U.S. elections? I'm trying to keep you awake. Taiwan, possibility of war.
No, you asked a question that I think is very reasonable about the peaceful transition. And I rose my hand, but it comes with a caveat. My presumption is that this time the sanity will prevail within the US and that Harris will actually get her nomination as a president that will be confirmed in January. And that will assure the peaceful transition because we will transition from one democratic administration to another one. No one can guarantee what will happen in case that Trump ends unsatisfied in the sense that either he loses or either he wins, and then what the Democrats can do in order to administratively surround him with some of the obstacles that will, in the end with him stepping into the presidency role. With all of that said, the security challenges, we have not mentioned a lot of them, and I'm not going to be a spoiler in the room, they will have to provide more concrete answers to the Gaza, to the Palestinian conflict. The issues that are currently happening there are not enough to put them under the ceasefire explanation that they were calling upon during the campaign period and will probably for the next 40 days, however it is left. So there are serious issues, more serious and more real one than the one that I have mentioned, although that has been a leading issue when it comes to administration before Ukrainian war. Yes.
So my panelists are very disciplined. I ask the audience also to be brief. So it's Marco and then we have, yes.
Yeah, this is just pure pundit speculation, but my working assumption is that if Trump is elected, that the consequences are likely to be along the following lines.
surviving the enlargement in the region of the Western Balkans. There was a few of the radicals, let's call, they really don't
also helps with a short-term interest or long-term interest, and act
Okay, no, I wanted to comment before, but now it's already...
No longer discussing US.
Absolutely. I don't want to come back to this.
Danny?
Well, thank you. No, what I wanted to add was also a discussion we had, I think it was last year, with Apple in Brussels. And what struck me... do you hear me now? Okay, so I go again. Last year we had this discussion in Brussels with Apple, and what stayed with me was the comment that now we are entering a period where hard power is the main approach or strategy pursued for resolving conflicts. Not soft power, not smart power. And I think in this election year we are seeing also this element play out. Who will people trust in a way that will be using the hard power for the difficult question we are facing? But this is also affecting our region as a overall thinking. Within our region, more leaders who think problems should be solved through hard power, but also more leaders taking stage in EU that also think hard power is the best way to resolve. So just a reflection perhaps from Maria and Lorenzo, but also Marco, in a sense, from our regional, but if this is a growing sense, also in the EU, that we have given up on dialogue, on more other means of solving our differences, and then we are just going to give, as they say, war a chance, or a conflict a chance, or a violence a chance to change things. Because also, and to end here, the conversation yesterday here was more about how our region always got attention once we created problems. And it's a very bad lesson, in a way.
Lorenzo, do you want to... I just want to say that mediation facilitation goes well in hand with hard power, but dialogue is broader.
Yes, no, I mean, I fully agree with what Danny just said. It's a visible trend. Now, I mean, with the new commission, we'll be talking about defense, which is, until now, it's been taboo for the EU. There will be a commissioner on defense, although I think it will mostly focus on ramping up the industry, not really defense from a more holistic or strategic point of view. Over the years, the EU has developed a series of instruments to be more active on the military side. I could mention the European Peace Facility, which is basically an off-budget instrument to provide lethal weapons to third countries. Then it's been used in the context of Ukraine, but not in the way it was originally planned. But this is a long story. We can get into that later if needed. And also, just a kind of an anecdote from an anecdotal point of view. So the EAS has always had a department focusing on mediation and peace building, conflict prevention. Recently, this department's been merged with defense partnerships. So the same person is overviewing the two elements. The people part of the mediation unit are 6, and the oldest is 45. So they're all like young officers, not very influential within the EES, so they're basically doing advocacy themselves towards the rest of the House. There will be a flagship event in Brussels next month on mediation that kind of brings together most important NGOs and USR, etc. And the head of the Department of Mediation will not be there, because that day he's traveling and he's busy with something else. This, I think, really shows, unfortunately, how relevant these aspects are at the moment in the EAS. We hope it's I'd say like a cycle, and now there's a lot of discussion on war industry, and hopefully once they ramp up the defense industry, we'll start talking about peace building again. But at the moment, it's pretty bleak.
I want to go to the question on which other elections matter. And Maria, you mentioned Austrian elections. Why do they matter for our region?
Yeah, but I just wanted to say 2 words on the previous question, to jump in here. Lorenzo got into very important details, but the overall picture, what it seems to me by looking again the designated commissioners. I remember before the war in Ukraine, we were talking about the EU being only a soft power. Now we are asking ourselves, is it all about hard power? So it's a very interesting transition that we are going through in only a couple of years' time. So if we look at the logic behind the portfolios, I think this is why I said recognition in my assumptions, because I think the current structure recognizes the role that the Baltic states, the Central Eastern European states played since the start of the war in Ukraine. And they got, Lithuania got the defense portfolio. We have Estonia as HRVP role. So it will be, to me it seems like, it's not, the center is not now only in France and Germany, but the war in Ukraine is shifting kind of the policies, the hard policies to the east, one thing. And then, but also we see that very powerful portfolios touch upon topics such as green transition, tech sovereignty, and I think this will be very important for the EU and how it will position in this upcoming tough period of US-China relations. So I think there's the thinking in the current structure. And then we have the soft element. And here Romania got a vice president portfolio, which is about people and skills. So we see recognition, of one of the newest member states and the path it went through in order, to converge with the EU standards. So I would say, as it stands now, yet to be seen what the implementation will look like. But to me, it seems that it's not just only about soft power. It's not only about hard power, but the EU recognizes, the need to be sovereign and the need to not forget, the social elements, which is basically, in an ECFR survey, we discovered that the EU is most popular globally with its way of living. It's the social element.
Okay, we need to close the panel, but I still want to pick up your brain quickly on your home country and on Austria. So what would that change, and do elections matter in a country which had 7 elections in 3 years and is trying to confront state capture?
It's going to be challenging to be very brief, given that I need to go through a 3-year period during which we voted 7 times the general elections. So very briefly, I think it's important to have a context in mind. Just as you mentioned in the beginning, the political crisis in Bulgaria started with the outgoing then government of maybe one of the most famous Bulgarian politicians here in the region of the Western Balkans, Boyko Borisov. So he's been governing with some short interruptions as of 2009, and Bulgaria joined the EU in 2007. Like if you ask me, you know, it's Borisov's party that I mostly associate with the Bulgarian political life. So he started governing in a time when foreign capitals were being directed to Bulgaria, and there was a huge concentration of EU funds into the country as a new member state, of course. So this created some practices. Then the financial crisis started, and the EU's profile, as Marco was mentioning, you know, started to change. So we were part of this transition of the EU not being so strong and not being about economic prosperity and about values and principles, but we witnessed, you know, kind of uglier face of where we can be, and then, you know, the questions of globalization arose and so on and so forth. But we were in a situation for 12 years when one political party was mostly governing, and therefore this led to some mentality, you know, with the public administration, you know, developing some sentiments towards that party, if I can put it that way. But then, you know, with all these corrupt practices becoming more and more visible, new actors, political actors, started to emerge on the Bulgarian political scene. One of them ran on an anti-corruption platform. We are here. One of the reasons we are here, where we are, Bulgaria, is that you cannot run solely on an anti-corruption platform. And the crisis started to multiply, and then COVID happened, and the war in Ukraine happened, and inflation happened. So you cannot base your political program on one sole problem. Our democratic system is exposed to unprecedented, you know, intersection of multiple crises. So it's very difficult in this, you know, complex environment of many crises hitting us, striking us simultaneously, you know, to have concentration of citizens voting towards only one party. And I think we were unlucky to have those political shifts happening simultaneously with those global changes and the multiple crises that hit the whole world.
Okay, we'll leave the Austria for the break, but I want to ask Lorenzo about Georgia, because we saw people of Georgia protesting, you know, for months, confronting hard repression against the law on foreign agents, which was adopted. Now there are elections, EU threatens with sanctions. Why should we care about what's happening in Georgia?
Well, I think like Georgia is an interesting example because it was also considered until like very recently one of the best pupils when it comes to enlargement policies and neighborhood, and then very quickly went on a, you know, democratic like sliding, and now I think it is also particularly relevant for the EU because there's also a mission there, which is quite large, a monitoring mission. They have a special representative for the South Caucasus that is also dealing with the breakaway regions in Georgia. And if the country is still not a fully fledged dictatorship, that's mostly because of the civil society. And the elections now in October, I think, there's still a glimmer of hope of like Georgian dreams of the ruling party that does not increase its grip on power and basically lead Georgia towards yet another liberal democracy or dictatorship. So I think this will be very, very important, especially as discussions on enlargement continue.
Marco, do you want to add anything on elections, or I can ask a question for all to vote? Yeah? Okay, so last vote before we close the panel. Most of countries have elections. There are a few that don't have. But my question is, do elections matter as one of the main instruments for getting your voice heard? So anyone who still believes in elections, raise your hand. Those that doubt, wow. And I didn't share any statistics about the quality of elections. Thank you very much for participation, and thanks to the panelists. We need to close on time and have a proper break to continue discussions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Sonia, Maria, Lorenzo, and Marco from Trupo. I'll invite you now to lunch. Lunch is served at the restaurant near the reception. We are back at 1:30 again for a panel in the afternoon, 2 panels that will be dedicated to disinformation and cybersecurity. We're going to more concrete discussion now on issues that are of common relevance for our region. So thank you so much.